And for those of you who have been following our channel that have been new, especially in the last year, you know that one of the primary reasons why I have stuck with and covered the Charlie Kirk assassination is because I believe that there is a direct correlation to the state of Israel and why it happened. And make no mistake, they are doing everything they can to keep the narrative in favor of this sort of lone nut theory, which has been going on for a long time. I have said from the very beginning, I don't believe for a second that Tyler Robinson was anything other than a patsy in the equation of this assassination. I saw enough amateur video that was taken that day to know that whatever they're telling you in terms of how he was executed, it is anything but that. I stick by the fact that I believe it was an explosive device in his lapel that was around his neck, that it made his neck explode. I believe that people like George Zinn get up in the crowd and say that it's them because they're in on the assassination. Nobody just shows up at an event when that person's been showing up at God knows how many significant events over how many decades. I don't look at anything outside of Mikey McCoy's reaction to immediately getting on the phone and somehow having a conversation with little Ben Shapiro. That makes no sense. Or the fact that there may have been explosive residue and devices within the SUV that Charlie Kirk was being dragged in. The fact that during the pretrial hearings, law enforcement has been grilled several times asking them, is there any video footage confirming Tyler Robinson's presence? The answer is no. Has anybody addressed the fact that the crime scene was paved over just a few days after it happened? Does anybody talk about the fact that there was that major meeting in the Hamptons after the Summerfest in which Josh Hammer got absolutely obliterated and humiliated by Dave Smith, a fellow Jew, but an anti-Zionist? Warning, Charlie, you cannot go down this road. And then Charlie not only didn't go down that road, but he said we shouldn't be going to war in Iran. And we know war with Iran has always been the last will and testament of Israel being able to do their Greater Israel project, of which they've been wanting to do since 1967. And so now we have to recognize that there are people in the midst who are going to say things about what's really going on. And they're going to know that there are those who are working against the interests of justice. Because in the end, justice is all that matters. You don't have to love Charlie Kirk. You don't have to love his ideology. But you have to love what our country is supposed to stand for. If it stands for nothing else, it stands for the Constitution. That's what it should stand for. But obviously, very few people agree because they make up their rules as they go along. But being able to have those values held up as some beacon of what the American way is supposed to be. Again, we are a complete shill of everything we've ever said that we were out to be, because we're not. Our country is a disaster zone, and opportunism flies in our face left and right, and people are willing to put their hands out and say, give me the money, I'll do what you say. I have no problem with that. You put him in the Hamptons, he says he's not going to go along with it. You find the text messages between him and Candace Owens saying that I don't want anything to do with Israel anymore. You hear his conversation with Charlie, with little Ben Shapiro. That all changed. You learn about what really went on in Butler, Pennsylvania. You learn about what really went on in Provo, Utah. The tarmac, Erica Kirk's reactions, Andrew Colvit's reactions, Mikey McCoy's reactions, Blake Neff's reactions. It's one big cover-up. And there's another person in this equation And you have to really ask yourself why there are people who still take anything that Nick Fuentes says at face value. Everything has to have a grain of salt, because the truth, it's hardly ever there.
Seen enough. I've seen enough. I've heard enough. That theory was ridiculous from the beginning. Whatever you think about Charlie Kirk, I obviously have my own personal, political, professional feelings about him. I think it's a horrific tragedy that he died. I think it's one of the saddest moments in our country's history, and I don't even think that's an exaggeration.
You know, I remember very shortly before he died that Nick Fuentes was constantly taunting him, constantly laughing at the prospect of somebody hurting Charlie, always thought it was a joke. And then when reality set in, oh yeah, things had to change pretty quickly. But for him to pretend like he genuinely cared about him, listen, we all saw the recordings prior to his assassination where groypers were calling into his show saying, are you too gutless to debate Nick Fuentes? You know he's going to wipe the floor with you, blah, blah, blah. And that went on for a long time. So in this case, there's no question that Fuentes saw a major economic opportunity to try to make himself look good and say that, oh, Charlie was my friend. I supported him. Because he saw a massive audience that was probably going to disappear from Charlie Kirk and was going to potentially find its way over to somebody like him. Now, that didn't happen, or at least I'm not sure it did. But he's very smooth. You know, Jen likes to talk about people in politics all the time that are smooth. And Nick Fuentes is smooth as fuck. That's why people like him. He's very good. He's an exceptional orator. He really is.
I really do. And as much as I have my disagreements, it's a disgusting, horrific act of brutality against a father, a husband. And I really do believe he was an admirable person. Even if I didn't share his politics, didn't agree with his approach, hard worker, the guy was the best at what he did. No.
Okay. Now, I'm sure some of you have probably noticed this, and I don't want to be picky about it. Actually, we've got to keep the screen big. Nick Fuentes has some really weird digits, especially his thumb. I don't know what the hell that is. It looks like a little snake growing out of the ground that is attached to his hand. Very weird looking extremity, to say the least. I always thought that there was something weird about that. It seemed like he had exceptionally large fingers. In this case, it's really weird.
No doubt about it. You can't not give him his due. I will tell you firsthand, as somebody that debates, I couldn't go and field any question from any college student at 200 events in a year. That's like a superhuman ability. Guy had it going on, okay?
Yes, but yet you insisted that he was dodging you from a debate question, and you constantly shit on him for not wanting to debate you because maybe you wouldn't be doing it in good faith. And now you want to say that you're kissing his ass? Again, that's not what you were saying prior to his death. And you have also been somebody who I have paid very close attention to when it comes to what you have said, point blank period, about Israel having any involvement in Charlie's assassination. You have insisted, almost to the point of being a Hasbro agent, of saying that there's no way Israel had anything to do with Charlie Kirk's assassination, and that's not why it happened. He's also somebody who has pushed the Tyler Robinson theory. This is a guy who's supposed to be thinking outside the box, right? But no. How could he if he's pushing that bullshit?
Horrific thing, but let's just be clear about who he was and what he represented. He was at the cross-section of the GOP base, which is increasingly these young white men on the campuses who increasingly are Israel critical. But he also sat between them and the donors. The donors, the big donors and the small donors, the middle-sized donors who are from a different generation. It's boomers, secular boomers, Protestant boomers, and a lot of Jews. And so he sat at the crossroads.
You're not going to convince me either that's an AI thumb or that's his thumb. Whatever the fuck is going on there, that thing's coming at you really close. Nick, shave your thumbs.
At a fateful inflection point in history, where the boomers are very pro-Israel, the donors are very pro-Israel, the institutions, the establishment is going one way, and the young people, who it was his job to corral into the GOP and organize and get them involved, they were going very anti-Israel. So why is there this contention? Why is it controversial? Was he on the side of Israel in the pocket? Was he turning against them? Well, I think the picture is a reflection of the moment and the position that he was in, which is that as a turning point leader, as the turning point founder, as the guy whose job it was to speak to the younger generation, and he did it every day on TikTok, on the campuses, he realized the extent to which Israel was falling from grace and losing popularity. He saw firsthand how unpopular it was becoming with the young people.
And once, this is of course assuming that the organization Turning Point USA was on the level, that it wasn't funded by the Zionist class, and that's ostensibly how it grew to be what it became. What you have to remember here is, and this is a key factor, if it was up to him, do you really think that Charlie Kirk was going to go against the grain of where the youth were going? Perhaps he was influenced by the direction that the young conservative youth of this country was heading when it came to the state of Israel. Whether their motivations are the same of young leftist individuals regarding the state of Israel is kind of neither here nor there. And the one thing we've learned, especially in the very quick aftermath of the Graham Plattner fiasco, the left does not know how to win battles. The right does. And the populist right, particularly those that are behind the likes of Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Ian Carroll, and the like, are going to fight. Now, I know a lot of people think that Nick Fuentes is a part of that fight, but I don't agree. I don't think he is in that fight. I think he's a total fraud. I know a lot of people like him, and I understand that, but the bullshit that comes out of his mouth, while I know a lot of it is for shock value, when you're talking like this isn't shock value. This is you're being a useful idiot or a valuable asset. Maybe both.
He saw firsthand how attitudes were changing about Israel, and he knew there was a problem. He knew that was a problem for Israel. He knew it was a problem for the GOP, and increasingly it was becoming a very acute problem for him, because the more that he defended Israel, the more it hurt his credibility. If your job is to get the young people involved and excited and organized, and they all hate Israel, and your job is to go and defend Israel, it's going to create a lot of friction. And I believe he was unhappy that he was put in that position. And that was reflected in the letter he sent to Netanyahu.
I think the only thing he was upset about regarding the letter with Netanyahu is that he didn't want to be dog walked by the donors of TPUSA anymore. They were told, no, you will be dog walked. You will do as we say or the money goes away. And his attitude finally became, fine, take it away. I'll figure out another way to raise it. He called their bluff, and they could not have that. He was too valuable of an asset. He was causing way too, and again, I don't think that, and this is more of the reason why I'm convinced more than ever that Israel was behind his assassination. This whole Tyler Robinson case is just a distraction. The biggest reason why I am convinced that Israel did the deed or made sure the deed was done is because they don't give a fuck who wins elections. They don't care that Charlie Kirk amassed a following of maybe 5 million plus people within his organization. That doesn't mean anything. So you win a few elections, big fucking deal. You know what does matter? If he's telling his 5 million plus followers, especially the future of this conservative country, that they should not be supporting the state of Israel, oh, he's got to go. As in, we are not only going to eliminate him, we're going to do it in full view of the public so they get the fucking message. And yet, meanwhile, Mr. Paid Asset, as far as I'm concerned, Nicky Boy here, wants you to believe that there is something else at play, and there isn't. The second people start getting this issue wrong, especially those that are high up in the game, don't ever trust them again. You know what can take a lifetime to gain trust? And a fraction of a moment to lose all of it? You constantly have to show exactly what in terms of integrity you have every day. Have you lost it? Have you kept it, gained it, etc.? But the second you lose it, or you show that you have none, you'll never get it back. And the only people hanging on are people who refuse to see it. That's how it works. And to be honest, that's how it should work.
He said, listen, man, I can't do all the work. I'm holding down the fort, defending Israel, but you got to meet me halfway and help me. Because these are losing arguments, and my job is to win arguments. These young people are not convinced, they don't like you, and the more I defend you, the more they don't like me. Help me help you. That was his message to Netanyahu. I think that was his message at Turning Point SAS in July of 2025, when he had Tucker talk about Epstein and he had the debate between Dave Smith and Josh Hammer. And I think that is what he conveyed even in those private Telegram messages.
If you didn't see the debate between Josh Hammer, Timu Ben-Shapiro, and Dave Smith, this was last summer. It's about, I think it was July of 25. See that debate. Look up the clips. I mean, they didn't want Dave Smith at the event to begin with. And then he sits down on that stage with Josh Hammer, and he literally hammers Josh into oblivion. In full view, one of the most popular big events of the year for TPUSA and conservative youth politics. They got the message. And yet, Charlie remained defiant, to his credit. And in his final messages with Candace Owens, he indicated, yeah, this might cost me my life. And it did.
But he was also on the side of the donors in the sense that Turning Point was a very rich organization, deeply connected to the Trump administration. And we know how much juice, we know how much power the Zionists have. So he also couldn't really upset them either. He couldn't completely alienate those guys at the same time. And I think this is where this perception comes from, that he was about to have this ideological epiphany and he was going to go against Israel. I think it represented a frustration.
Again, this is a person who wants to deny that Candace Owens nailed his ass to the wall and told him, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I have the receipts. I have the records. I know what Charlie was thinking. I know what he was saying. And yet he wants you to believe that, don't believe Candace and don't believe Charlie either. He didn't mean what he was saying. Here's what he really meant. Is the check in the mail for him as well? Probably. Let me sidebar this for a second. We did a clip on Jaylen Brown that recently gained traction. For the first few days, it wasn't getting much of anything. And then the next thing you know, it went from like 1,500 views up to 15,000 views. And when I found out that the Google algorithm within YouTube does, you know what they do? They really only let you get paid. The money that you're going to collect comes within the first 48 hours. After that, even if you see a major surge, you're not going to get compensated for it. If you think that they don't fuck with us, they don't throttle us simply because we're telling the truth, simply because we do go max and we do not hide a fucking thing from anybody, because at least we can live with ourselves. That is a big part of it. And that's why you see people like Clavicular, for example, going over to Israel and offering to sell out. Tell me what I need to do. Like I said, do I have to take a circle jerk in front of the wall? Do I have to take it from behind and give it at the same time? Who cares? You going to pay me? You're going to make me more famous, more powerful? Oh, yeah, I'm in. And that's really how it is. We have to be able to live with ourselves knowing that the platform we have is being used for good and nothing more. And in this case, the good we're doing is helping people who still think that Nick Fuentes is worth following to give it a second thought.
That he was being torn in two. He had to be bipolar because he would speak to the donors and he'd speak to the young people, and the donors wanted one thing and the young people wanted something very differently. And I think it was out of frustration that he was saying, I can't please everybody here. And I think that's why there was this appearance of a flipping or something like that.
There is no appearance. It is exactly what happened. It is pretty obvious that that's what happened. Otherwise, he never would have been killed. But as I mentioned before, little Nicky has made it a habit of insinuating that Tyler Robinson did in fact do the deed on behalf of his furry boyfriend. God help us all. Now, do I think it's possible that Tyler Robinson was involved? I think he could definitely be a patsy. I think it's, very much like a Lee Harvey situation where he may very well have been in intelligence or was in training in intelligence, which is what is being taught at Utah Valley University. That is a big part of it. And getting caught up in these clandestine type operations where you just don't know. You didn't know that the joke was on you. Maybe you know now.